Alright, welcome back guys. My name is Logan with West Desert Shooter. In this video, I want to do some reloading and range testing on some Sierra 69 grain hollow point boat tail projectiles. We're going to be shooting them out of my Uintah Precision AR15. It is a semi-automatic chambered in .223 Wild. So what we're going to be using for brass is some Lake City mixed head stamp 556 brass. It's all been fully prepped, and we got rid of the military crimp on the primer pocket. Let's talk about the primers we're going to use. Federal Premium AR Small Rifle Match. I was lucky enough to come across some of these recently. These are some of my old stock, which is why they still say $4.19 each on the pack. I really wish that I had paid that for the latest one, but unfortunately, everything's just about doubled or tripled in price. Anyway, what we're going to be doing today is using 2 different types of powders, and I want to shoot 5 different charges of each different type of powder, and we're going to move up in half grain increments to kind of cover a pretty broad range of charge weights, and we're going to see what kind of velocities we can get up to. Now, one recent addition to my bench is the new Hornady Handbook of Cartridge Reloading, the 11th edition. This may not be so new. I know it's more recent than my 9th edition was, and this now has every cartridge that I have in the safe, so that's pretty awesome, and it's going to help me out with the newer projectiles like the ELD Match, ELD X, the Sub X, you know, some good modern bullets, as well as 6mm ARC. Lots of fun stuff inside here, and it's a big jump ahead of where my 9th edition was. Like I say, they didn't even have ELD Match bullets in here. Now, I'm going to be using some data from the Hornady book on the 68 grain Hornady hollow point boat tail because it is such a similar projectile. Let's see here. Let's jump up ahead. So the low data that we're looking at, 68 grain boat tail hollow point match, specifically in the 5.56 NATO chambering. Hornady does have service rifle data for .223 Remington, but because we are using 5.56 brass, I'm going to look at the 5.56 low data. Now we're going to get some conflicting information here from Sierra, actually from Hodgdon as well. So let's take a look at this. For H4895, we got 20.8 all the way up to 24.3. Now this is some old Hodgdon powders data, and we can take a look here. 69 grain Sierra hollow point boat tail, 4895, 24 grains to 26 grains. Now, an important piece of information here that I kind of wanted to talk you guys through this is that this is for .223 Remington and not 5.56. So it's quite a bit higher powder charge to the max pressure. So what I'm assuming is the .223 Remington brass that they are using has a larger case capacity, whereas the 5.56 brass is a little bit thicker walls, more robust, and typically it has less case capacity and increases your pressure with a smaller powder charge. So what we're looking at in the 5.56 manual accounts for that. So that's why the charges are lower, and I think in the .223 Remington, that's why the charges are higher. Possibly that they were also testing on a bolt gun over a semi-automatic platform, which we're going to be using a direct impingement semi-automatic AR-15. So what we're going to do is take these 2 loads, these data. With the H4895, my plan is to shoot from 22.5 grains up to 24.5 grains. So we're going to go slightly over what Hornady lists as max, but well under the max pressure in the Hodgdon powders load data here. Hodgdon is not afraid to push pressure, I'll tell you that. Some of the previous data I've used on this can get pretty spicy, so we're nowhere near the max on the Hodgdon powder, but we're pushing it on the limit of Hornady's, which is typically a little bit more reserved and not quite pushing things as hard. For our second powder, CFE223, this manual is probably predates the CFE223, which leaves us with the Hornady manual yet again. 68 grain CFE223 right down here, from 23.3 up to 26.9 grains. So we're going to follow that trend with what we did previously. We're going to go right up near the max of what Hornady says, all the way up to 27 grains. We're just going to push beyond that max just a touch and see what happens. So we're going to start with 25 half grain increments up to 27. So we're going to do 5-shot groups. We're going to do 5 different charges between CFE223 and H4895. I have never shot CFE223. It's one of the few powders that was on the shelf recently. Figured I'd grab it, throw it in through my AR-15, see how the gun likes it, see what kind of velocities we can get. And for me, as a precision rifle long-range shooter, I really like to look for low standard deviations and consistent muzzle velocities. So that's something that I'm really going to weigh heavy on. For my long range shots, I really want consistent muzzle velocities. So that's very important to me. CFE223 is a ball powder, and we'll take a look at it here in a minute. But I think we're going to start out with H4895, which is a traditional cut stick powder. Let's get that into our powder measure and get that thing warmed up. I do have a RCBS Chargemaster Light. We're going to have to get that warming up while I prime my brass by hand. And to do that, I've got a Frankfurt Arsenal hand primer right here. It's got a little adjustment dial here that you can adjust primer seating depth, but we also need to change out our shell holder on this. So I'm going to do all this off camera. Maybe I'll kick the camera on if anything interesting pops up. All right, so we've got our powder dispenser warming up, and it's cycled a few charges now. Sometimes I just do that to help it warm up quicker. I threw in my bullet comparator, and I had 4 rounds previously loaded up with some Sierra 69 grains and made sure that their overall length was good, and then I zeroed out my calipers on the base to ogive of the bullet. So we're going to set the new ammo to that exact number, which is within magazine length. The overall length was like 2.245, but of course with the uneven hollow point on these bullets, sometimes those numbers vary just a little bit, a couple thousandths. So that's why I'm going off the ogive of the bullet. And I was really surprised to see that all of these were within 1,000th. Only one of them came out as 1,000th. The other 3 were dead on 0. So pretty awesome, considering that my seating die is just an old Lee 223 Remington die. I do want to get some more precise dies for this thing. I am using RCBS small base resizing die. That seemed to help with some cycling issues I had a while back, but that wasn't related to this gun in particular, but I've continued to use that small base anyway. One other thing is that I wanted to pick up some of the competition cedar dies from Redding. I'd like to get those for my 6.5 Creedmoor and my 223 Remington, so hopefully we can make that happen in the future. It's time to start throwing some charges. 22.5 grains to start of H4895. I know that that's H4895 because it's got sticks in the powder here. It's not a ball powder. 22.5, and let's go. So this is where it's pretty easy. It just kicks out a charge. I throw it in the case. We do have a pretty sweet Precision hardcore gear powder funnel, all aluminum. Every different caliber is a different color, so it makes it easy to keep track of them. Charge number 1 going in the case. Already got things primed. Move your funnel, put it back on the powder thrower, throw the cover on just in case, and that's how this all goes, guys. So we will catch up to you here in a second. Let's go ahead and check our case fill. It's down below the shoulder on the brass, so it's sitting about right here, so lots of room for more powder, considering these 69 grains don't go terribly far down into the case. So that's looking good. Let's go ahead and seat one. From our other ammo, I bet it's just a couple thousandths long. Yep, 5 thousandths long, 4 thousandths, so just want to breathe on this seating die. I'm using a Mech Marksman single stage press. Within 1.5 thou, I'll take that. So first round is loaded, and we are ready to party, guys. So since it's been a while since I've ran this Chargemaster Light, or even used my secondary scale that used to be my primary, I've decided to fire both up and reference each other. So far, everything's lining up 100%. Just put fresh batteries in my secondary scale here, and went ahead and zeroed it out with the pan. So there we go. That's something interesting. 24.7. What did the RCBS say it was? It said 24.5. So this is drifting a little bit. So here's what we're going to do. Put the loaded pan on. Tear. I'm going to trust the Chargemaster right now. I'm going to go ahead and dump this powder into the cartridge. Now let's weigh our empty pan. 24.5. So this was drifting a bit, whereas the Chargemaster was correct. Now, because I'm changing powder charge between every 5 rounds, it does give me the opportunity to stop the scale, zero it without the pan, re-zero it with the pan, and then start my new charge weight. So that helps keep the scale just dead on accurate, whereas apparently this guy's floating around a little bit. But just kind of a few little things here. I'm trying to make sure I'm making this as consistent as possible. But our powder fill is definitely coming up with these last couple grains, and we are starting to just barely touch these kernels as we're seating bullets. So just the tiniest little crunch, Not a huge deal, definitely nothing worth being worried about. I compress Varget more than this, and I've shot the hell out of those and never had an issue. So let's double check our overall length. I've been checking just about every single one of these still. Super consistent seating, so it's not like the powder crunch is affecting our overall length. So now we're actually going to swap powder, so I'm going to turn this off, drain it, put the CFE223 in after I seat some bullets and complete our H4895 work. Let's get started on CFE223. Checking in once again. First off, shout out to the Charge Master light, because this thing kicks ass. It makes things just simple while I can do all my other checks and just keep powder moving out of this thing. And then I also mark all my charges. So H4895, I just put an H and then the charge weight, and the CFE, I'm just putting a C in the charge weight. So way to keep track of it in case my ammo case were to tip over. You never know what's going to happen out there. Alright guys, first time working with CFE223, everything went super smooth. The only thing I kind of noticed was just that on my pan itself for dumping the powder charges, a little bit of static there, and the powder seemed to like stick to it, so I just had to click it a little bit more than normal. No real big deal there. On the 27 grain charge, looks like our powder fill was just below the shoulder line here, so right where you want it, a good solid case fill without being too compressed. The H4895 did just get a little bit crunchy, so it's right up around that shoulder line, maybe just a little above it, and looking pretty good so far. So excited to get out to the desert, and I will see you guys out on the range with the Uintah Precision UPR15.
H4895, 22.5 grains. Shot string 23 in the Magnetospeed. Check pressure real quick. So muzzle velocity 25-20 on that first shot. Primers look more than fine. Average speed of 25-17, SD of 29.2. Check pressure. Okay, looking a little better. Average of 26-12 with an SD of 17. So we went from an average of 25-17 to 26-12 in a half grain increment. So this might get hot quick. We will find out. Although 25-15 is pretty anemic for a 69 grain. This is a nice calm day, just a tiny amount of breeze rolling through, which is good. Keeps the dust out of my shooting range. Alright, the last four seem to do decent on that. Average 27.66, SD 21. Velocity's a little all over the place here, but certainly seems like they wanted a group. Velocity 28.58 on that. Primers still look pretty good, round corners. Just the slightest little cratering. From where I'm sitting, that looks really good. All right, and the SD is finally acceptable. Average 28.60, SD 13.8. Time to let the rifle cool down, and then we're gonna move on to CFE223. All right, the rifle had about 15 minutes in the air conditioning in the truck, so nice and cool. Suppressor is cool to the touch. She's ready for more groups. Shot string 27 on CFE223, 25 grains. Gonna follow our normal pattern of first shot, check for pressure, and then shoot 4 more. All right, first shot, CFE223 ever. Here we go. First shot 2631. So I don't anticipate pressure issues. Oh yeah, completely round corners, no issue. Average velocity 2629, SD of 18.7. Very forward ejection pattern with the CFE. Which tells me it's probably a little underpowered. Now, one thing I want to say about these groups is that every time I'm taking this first shot, the second round sits there and cooks in the chamber, and I had to get off the rifle and then get back on it again. So if we have a flyer on our first shot and even our second, it honestly makes sense. So like the last three are a really good representation of what it will do. Hopefully all 5 end up in the same spot, but you know, it's just the reality of what we're dealing with. Average velocity 2705, SD of 14, so that's a better standard deviation than we've been seeing. Yeah, not quite as fast of a velocity increase as H4895 so far. So we may not hit as high of speeds as 4895. We're going to find out. Primers are starting to flatten out to that normal pressure look, to where we're fulfilling the pressure we need without looking scary. That looks awful from here. Yeah, all over the target on that one. That's just bad. I don't feel that I did anything like horribly wrong there, as far as shooting and pulling the trigger. I really wouldn't be worried about velocity until we get like over 2900, but this is a 16-inch barrel, so we're going to be limited on velocity a little bit. I'm used to my 18-inch barrel. Okay, average 2812. Damn it, I didn't archive my series. Final charge of 27 grains with the largest variance in headspace. 2911. So like I mentioned earlier, this is the point where I would start to care about pressure. 27 grains looks great. That kind of workhorse level of flattened out primer. It still has round edges, no cratering to speak of. Looks great. Let's continue on. And I bet this group is gonna suck, despite me shooting the best yet. Like, I'm really starting to feel my groove and where I need to preload and get my rear support set each time. Well, all right, there we go. Finally, some decent velocities. Average 2913, SD 8.1. Best SD of the day, actually. CFE223 out of a ball powder. Very interesting. Which this had horrible headspace variance, so that's very interesting to see a good SD. So the last 2 shots I shot there, I put the tall headspace ones at the bottom of the mag in hopes that if they were to jam, I would get some downrange beforehand. So if we got rid of that shot 4, SD 3.7, average 2910. That is a real potential for a shooting round right there. High velocity, group looks awful just as I predicted.
Alright guys, so you probably heard me mention it right at the end on those last couple groups. I made a huge mistake, and right before I left for the range trip, I realized, paranoid in my underwear late at night before the range trip, that I needed to check headspace on that brass that I was using for these reloads. Now, this brass was prepped like years ago and was for my Palmetto State Armory AR-15. This rifle has a little bit more of a match chamber in it, and it runs a little tighter headspace, which is a good thing overall. Factory ammo all works in it just fine, no issues. But the brass that I had used had huge variations in headspace, and I checked them with my headspace comparator. I've actually been recently working on resizing some 223 brass for this AR to load up a bunch of bulk stuff, and the headspace goal that I'm shooting for is 1.457. So when I check this, I want my resized piece of brass to end up at 0, and I checked some of the brass in here, and some of it did hit that mark or a little less, and there's about a couple thousandths window, right? You want 3 thousandths bump back from a fired piece of brass. So basically, I was seeing numbers in 10 thousandths over what my resized piece of brass should be, which is bad. That's too much. And I ended up segregating the large headspace brass here in the case here, and I loaded those last in the magazine. So meaning I put them in there first in case that I had issues on the range and a piece of brass got stuck in my chamber. Hopefully I would be able to shoot 3 to 4 rounds before that tall piece of headspace brass would get in there. So what's interesting here is I had large variations in headspace, and it seemed like it was particularly bad in the brass that I happened to use with the CFE223 loads. So I largely attribute the horrible groups of CFE223 to that bad headspace. Now, is it going to shoot as good as H4895 with the correct brass? I'm not sure, but I want to find out. So where we're going from here is I actually want to basically reshoot CFE223, and then I'm going to reload some of the H4895 loads that shot well today, and we're going to see how they do downrange without a Magnetospeed chronograph on them. What was interesting is with the variations in headspace, we got a killer SD. Like, I had some with the worst headspace variation, and that was my best standard deviation on the powder. So really interesting that you can still get consistent velocities, but the groups just were absolute crap. So we're gonna find out if the groups were because of the powder or because of the bad brass prep. So that's all my fault, and I apologize for that, but I had already loaded up 50 rounds and I had already primed the brass. I don't have a body die, so trying to correct it before I went and shot it really didn't do me a whole lot of good. At least I could collect velocities, which we did, and now we can go back, ditch the Magnetospeed, and see how it does downrange without a Magnetospeed on it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these groups. Overall, H4895 kicking some serious ass. Like I mentioned out there on the range, the first shot, you know, you always get that, not necessarily a cold bore shot, but after the first shot, I checked pressure on every round. So I had to break my position behind shooting the rifle, and then that round would sit in the chamber and cook for an extra 30 to 45 seconds while I stood up, grabbed a piece of brass, took a look at it, and then decided to continue on. So the second shot should be a flyer, right? Like, if the second shot was a flyer, then I wouldn't be surprised. However, when reviewing the footage, I only really saw one where the second round was a noticeable flyer. So that's across the CFE and all that. I kind of paid attention to that, whether the first round flew off into the distance or the second round did, and then the last three should be consistent. Overall, the H4895 grouped well across all 5 shots and across all 5 powder charges. Let's quickly run through these group sizes with H4895 because some of these are super impressive. Our first group at our lowest charge, 1.17 inches, not too bad. Kind of a lot of vertical in that one, which is a little bit interesting. And then our second group is 0.89 inches. That one looked pretty dang good as well. Our third group was interesting because we had that one shot that flew a little bit high at 23.5 grains. So if you look at the overall group, it's 1.52 inches. But if you look at it, the 4 shots without that flyer in there, it's a 1/2 inch group. And it gave us a good standard deviation as well. So I want to go back and check that one more time on the range. Like I say, load up 2 more 5-shot groups with that. And then at 24 grains, we shot another one with just 1 flyer in it, which overall group 1.22. But if you remove the flyer, it ends up being a 0.52 inch group. And then our final group at 24.5 grains of H4895, velocity 2860, all 5 shots went into 0.39 inches. That is ridiculously good for an AR-15 with a 16-inch barrel. So this thing is definitely like in these Sierras being pushed by the H4895. I'm very impressed by that. And I do want to follow up with 10 more rounds of 24.5 grains with that H4895 and shoot 2 more 5-shot groups with that as well. The one that I don't think represented what it could truly do was 23.5 grains of H4895. The 4 grouped really tight next to each other, and then I had that 1 flyer. So I'm probably going to reload 5 to 10 of each of those charges and go shoot 2 more groups with both of those charges and see how they group and pattern on paper again. So that's my plan with the H4895 from here. On the CFE223 side of things, I think I'm just going to reload the whole thing with super consistent brass. All the brass has been resized specific to this gun. It has all been cut down to the exact same length, chamfered and deburred. All the primer pockets were double insured to make sure all the military crimps have been removed. This is all brass that I had previously fired in my rifles and reloaded, and then this is their third firing. So it should be super consistent for this next range trip across all the brass. Now the head stamps are no longer Lake City. It is actually some Mark 262 brass that I was able to get a hold of in bulk. So all of it is from the same lot, and it should be very consistent across that lot, right? So I had like 1,000 pieces of that I was able to get my hands on, and I've been shooting that quite a lot over the past couple of years. So there is our plan for our next range trip, but overall, really impressed by H4895. Did awesome. I do want to talk about the target real quick. This is a shipping label that I printed these out on that I just kind of designed last minute, and it's a 1-inch edge on the diamond, and then across the diamonds is 1 3/8 across it, and then the center is a 1/2-inch edge. So you got like a 1/2-inch target in the center and then a 1-inch square around it. Pretty simple design. And I am aiming at the top point of that diamond. So I just have an infinitely small aiming point to try and get as small as a group as possible. With my Archon Optics SH4 Gen 2, I have a floating dot center in my reticle, so I just put that dot right in the black of that tip and did my best to send them downrange and get them nice and small in the group. Which overall, I felt really good about most of my trigger pulls. I think I had one where it wasn't really feeling the greatest, but towards the end with the CFE, I really got a good groove of where I felt comfortable behind the gun and was able to get that rear rest just super consistent every time. So for CFE223, basically accuracy, I'm not even going to consider these results at all, but we did get velocities, and we also know that we can shoot these powders and charges safely with the pressure that we're looking at, right? So that's super helpful. So the velocity information is really good, and then the pressure information is really good. So next time we can go run without a Magnetospeed. It doesn't have that extra weight hanging out on the end of the gun. We will see if that affects our accuracy in a negative or a positive way. So hopefully it's positive, although in my experience, I've shot good groups with my Magneto and then I've removed it and I've still shot good groups. So hopefully it's just a consistency thing. I think that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this format. It's the first time I've put like this much work into a reloading video. And man, there's actually a lot more to it than I originally anticipated, but hopefully the information was clear. I apologize about the bad headspace. Believe me, I did not want that. And like I said, late at night, checking it in my underwear before I took off. And yeah, that wasn't good at all. So unfortunately, that's just what I had on hand when I started reloading this, but I've done a bunch of brass prep, got about 400 pieces of brass now prepped, super consistent for this gun to do future testing as well. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up at this point. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Be sure to keep an eye out for more West Desert Shooter content in the future and hit the affiliate links down below. It's how you can help support me. I've got a Shoot Steel affiliate link, so if you want to go shoot steel at long range, they are an excellent target, and I really enjoy shooting my Shoot Steel targets. I've also got Archon Optics. Use code WDS for free shipping at checkout. It will also get you entered into a scope drawing that they give away a scope every month. These things have been really awesome for me as far as tracking and performance. I like the reticles. I like just the overall package with the Archon Optics. And man, they're just a smoking deal. They're still awesome. So definitely check out Archon Optics on your guys' way out. And thanks so much to my friends at Uintah Precision. What an absolutely awesome functioning AR-15. This one is custom coated in a brown color for me. Yeah, this is their complete rifle, the semi-auto variant, which is funny to say for an AR-15 because Uintah Precision traditionally makes bolt-action ARs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I have tons of video on it, and they have an excellent website you can go and check out at uintahprecision.com. From there, I think that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks so much again. We will see you in the next one.